Hi, Matt Trinka here, and today I want to talk about something that is a little taboo, maybe we don't talk about too often, and that is death and passing into the next life. And someone raised this analogy to me once, and it really made a lot of sense, all the sense in the world. And the more you dive deeper into the analogy, it's just fascinating. So think of your birth as your first kind of passing into the next life, and your death as second passing into the next life, which is eternity. And so really, there's really kind of two births in a way. And the same way that you are born into this world, you will be born into the next world. Very similar. I mean, from a spiritual perspective, not from necessarily a physical perspective, because it'll be different, but bear with me as we talk through this for a minute. So imagine when you were forming in your mother's womb, that's all you knew, right? Was this darkness. It didn't really bother you, right? Your brain was still forming, honestly. Your soul was infused into your physical being sometime around conception, let's assume. So you were alive since conception. You didn't really have the power of thought necessarily, but you at some point became aware of your surroundings, and you were like, hey, this is life. This is cool. Like, I can kind of swim around. I can move. I can suck my thumb. I can breathe. My mommy feeds me. I have this umbilical cord. I get everything I need. I can hear voices, as you start to get older, right? You can hear voices. You don't know where they're coming from. They sound familiar, comforting. Maybe you hear music. You see some light maybe through, the womb. And so maybe like you start gaining some awareness of your senses. Maybe you can start to feel things, and that's your world. And it's very comfortable, right? It's super comfortable. We always talk about wanting to go back to the womb, right? Like that was the most peaceful time maybe in our lives. But then one day, all of a sudden, you don't really have control over it. You're pushed out through your mother, and it's probably, I imagine, if I'm a baby, good thing we don't remember it. It's probably a pretty traumatic experience, being born. I know for some of my kids, it seemed like they got a little beat up in the process. It's a miracle, just how the whole system works that God created for babies being born. But women out there, you're amazing. But one day we emerge from our safe, cozy spot, the life that we knew, into this dazzling, bright new world. The colors are amazing. We see people, we see the voices that we've been hearing all of our lives, like kind of muffled. Now we see them face to face. We see our parents. We can smell them, touch them. We drink our mother's milk. We eat food for the first time ourselves. The umbilical cord is cut, and that life in the womb becomes a more and more distant memory. Like, I can't think or believe that hardly any of us really remember what it was truly like to be in the womb, or even to be born. I mean, all those memories, those maybe if they're traumatic experiences, they have passed from our memory and could be the furthest thing from our mind at this point. Our life back in the womb, we don't even think about it. We don't even worry about it anymore. Did I have any trauma in the womb? I don't know. It doesn't bother me at this point. I'm fully immersed in this world, and at an early age, we're able to adjust and think about our life in the womb is about 9 months. Our life on this earth is maybe 90 years, if we're blessed. And maybe 8 to 10 times what we spent in the womb. And then our life after this now is going to be eternity. So even think 8 to 10 times of what we spend on earth, that's, 300, 800,000 years. And that passes like a blink of an eye in heaven, we're told. So, I think you can see the time scale kind of increasing as God gets us ready for eternity. We're spending more and more time in these different environments, these different lives. getting us ready for that greater life after this one. And in our life after this one, so we're going to have a passing, and it could be peaceful, it could be gentle, it could be violent, it could be traumatic, but God will be waiting for us there on the other side. And just, watching, if you watch a lot of these like stories of near-death experiences, people that have gone to heaven, or, forbid, they've gone to hell, and maybe they've come back, or were saved by Jesus in that experience. You hear the accounts, and it's always very similar. Hey, I died in this violent way, but I rose out of my body, and I felt this tremendous peace, and I wasn't sad anymore. It was just happiness, joy, overcoming feeling of consolation. I saw a figure there, and people overwhelmingly say this figure resembled Jesus, or they didn't really know Jesus, but they describe a figure that looks like Jesus. And oftentimes they're converted, as they come back from these near-death experiences. So that's the only reference, by the way, that we really have of what it's like to pass and go to heaven. But if you listen to these folks that have studied thousands of these near-death experiences, the one message they always come back with is that there's this great sense of peace, especially if you believe in a God, or if you call out to God for help. Those people that reject God, that don't want God, God will, honor that wish if that's what they want. But we've seen experiences, last words from people that didn't believe in God, that it was not what they expected. Some of the last words of some of these famous atheists is, "Oh no, this is not right. Something's wrong here." And that's scary, like that's why I bet on God. Because no matter what, at least I'll have a peaceful death and a hope, in the afterlife. And best case, I'm going to heaven for the rest of eternity. So I think that's pretty amazing. Just bet on God there, and your death will be, I think, guaranteed more peaceful and more hopeful. And you'll be less fearful about it than those people that don't. And God will give you what you want. Like I said, He will. If you don't want to be with Him, if you don't believe in Him, if you reject Him, then for eternity, you'll be separated from God. And that's, it pains Him, I'm sure. But if that's what you want, He'll give it to you because He loves you. And the descriptions of hell, super scary. I mean, you don't want to be there. I think that's the place you don't want to be for eternity. Just the lack of God in and of itself, just knowing that there is a God, that He is love, incarnate, and being separated from that love for all eternity. I mean, that just is a torture enough. Forget the fire and the brimstone, which, a lot of people have talked about is a real thing. Forget that even. Just the separation of God alone, just being forever hopeless, knowing that you'll never get there, that you'll never experience it. That's enough to drive you crazy. And no wonder people or angels even turn into demons, being away from God. Like it's enough to drive you mad. So you don't want to be there. But for those that put their hope and trust in God, I think the next life will be something akin to our birth into this life, where you will pass and you won't really remember. You won't really care, because this new amazing reality that you are going to be born into in the second birth will be so vibrant, so amazing. You'll have more senses, you'll have more awareness, more knowledge than you ever did here on this earth. This earth is a pale comparison, is what we hear oftentimes from people that come back from heaven. This earth is just pale and, I don't know, kind of dirty and oppressive. And they always want to go back, like they're sad. They're kind of angry sometimes even when they come back to earth. But also, I think, a little bit glad that they have another chance to do God's will. Because I think once you get into heaven, so this one person talked about standing in front of the throne of Jesus and just being enthralled and just being filled with love. And the only thing he could think of is, I want to do whatever you want me to do. Just tell me what to do. I want to do it for all eternity because it brings me so much joy. It's like the greatest gift. It's like winning the lottery times a million. This feeling of just being in God's presence. And you get to experience that for all eternity. you're fully fulfilled. Whatever capacity your heart has, and they talk about the saints, will they receive a greater gift than us? I mean, honestly, everyone that goes to heaven will be perfectly fulfilled. And the saints, they might have a larger, bowl, a larger heart, so to speak. So maybe their fulfillment will be greater in measure because, they've done the work here on earth to open themselves more, and they have, more emptiness to fill, or maybe because they've emptied themselves to God completely. But you'll all be fully satisfied in heaven, and you won't worry about anything here on earth. I mean, sure, people can pray and you can intercede for them. That's what I've heard. But honestly, heaven is going to be perfect, and you want to be perfect also to get into heaven. I mean, we're not able to do that here on earth just through our own merits. But I think through the sacrifice of Jesus, we can be assured that if we place our faith in God, in his sacrifice, in his salvation, that he will make us worthy. And maybe there's a process of purification. Some people call it purgatory. I do believe that that's a perfectly reasonable thing to believe, because we need to be purified to be in heaven, to be perfect, to be in that perfect place. Our souls also need to be, perfectly cleaned and white. And whether that's Jesus, whether that's through a flame, I don't believe it's going to be necessarily a super painful punishment. Maybe for some people it'll be longer and worse than others, that separation from God as you're waiting to get into heaven. But even if you get into purgatory and you have to go through that purification, it's still worth it, because you know that someday, hopefully, God willing, you're going to make it into those gates of the kingdom there in heaven. And so, yeah, I think if you draw that parallel back to your birth into this world, I think our birth into the next world is going to be very similar. It might be a little painful in our passing, but we don't need to fear it, because immediately at that moment after we're gone, God's going to be there to greet us with open arms, to comfort us, and we're going to be full of love. And we're not going to have a worry or a care in this world. We're going to be restored to health, to our best version of ourselves. And God's just going to embrace us and love us, and we're going to be in his presence for all eternity. And that is the greatest gift, the greatest thing that we've ever experienced, that we will ever experience, better than anything on this earth, times a million. And so that's what we have to look forward to. So I just want to give you that message today. Think about it a little bit, and just have faith and trust, and don't worry. If you're going through sickness, don't be afraid. God's with you. He's by your side during these tough times, and he'll be there with you, whatever path lies ahead, whether it's recovery, whether it's suffering, whether it's death and birth into the next world. Just place your faith and your trust in him. And I think what's waiting for you on the other side is just so much greater than you could imagine. God has the very best plan, the very best intentions overall. We might think we know the best thing for us, but he knows overall, what is the best situation, the best scenario. And you just got to place your faith and trust in him, that whatever he decides is going to be the best thing for you, and you're going to have the outcome is going to be greater than you can imagine. So I hope that fills you with some faith and hope and trust and just gladness and joy this day. And we're meant to be joyful people. And when I think about this birth into heaven and what awaits me, it fills me with joy and hope. So I pray for that for you as well this day. God bless you. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.